Hey, seventh graders, it's good to see you guys. This week we have two Zoom meetings, and it's our last week of school. Tuesday and Friday, we'll meet again for Zoom. You have no readings this week. All you have to do is get caught up on any uh, readings you haven't done yet this year, this 9 weeks, and you could get those turned in this week. So get caught up on anything you've left undone, and that's your homework this week. Besides watching these videos and meeting for class on Tuesday and Friday. Well, what do we have to do this week? Well, we have 50 years to cover, and we only have 5 days to do it in. And that's going to be tough, and it's going to be impossible. But we'll just do a little bit, and we'll try to do a couple deep dives into some important areas, and you'll get this whole summer to do more research and to look deeper into some of these topics. So uh, here we go. Let's talk about the 1970s. Last week we talked about the 1960s and the civil rights era struggle. This week we're going to talk about the next 50 years from the 70s till today. I can't get into everything, but here we go. We'll talk about something that really important that happens in the 70s, Roe v. Wade. This is an important milestone in our country's history. A dark, dark chapter begins. For the last almost 50 years now, we've legalized murder in our country. The process of killing an unborn child, abortion, has claimed the lives of somewhere over 45 million, maybe even upwards of 55 million. So, how did this happen? Well, the Supreme Court um, in gets a case in 1972, 73 that they start to hear, and it's about whether states have rights to prohibit a woman from getting an abortion, and they rule in favor of the woman, who is never really publicly officially named in this lawsuit, who has since recanted her stance on abortion. But nevertheless, they decide that based upon the 14th Amendment, remember, the 14th Amendment is one of the Civil War amendments. The 14th Amendment, they say, protects people's privacy, and abortion falls under the category of private things. And since it falls into that category, abortion is protected under the Constitution. They also use the 14th Amendment to say that it does not give the right of humanity or humanness to something that's not born. So they use the 14th Amendment two different ways. One way, they say the people who wrote the amendment did not mean it for it to protect unborn people. And they say the 14th Amendment protects people's privacy, and part of their privacy is their ability to have these kind of medical procedures, like abortion. So those two things they use to argue, saying that abortion is constitutionally allowed. So we've seen in our country the last 50 years a sharp divide between the pro-life movement and the pro-choice movement. In some ways, I think it's more important than some of the other political things that have happened in that era. From, we think about maybe like Vietnam or the Korean War, or things that happened in the 50s and 60s. These kind of big wars that have happened more recently. This has had a more lasting impact, I think, in our country. The divide between the right and the left often falls along these lines of abortion, conservatives versus liberals, Democrats, Republicans often break on this debate of pro-life versus pro-choice. What's the legacy of Roe v. Wade? Well, it's further pushed our country in a direction of rights and individual freedom over everything else. We take it almost for granted, it seems like, in America, that if you have a right to something, you your individual freedom cannot be ever impinged upon you. There's no way in which you can ever lose your individual freedom, individual rights. And there's part of us that say, yeah, that sounds good, that sounds right. But when it starts to infringe upon the rights of other people, especially the unborn, that's where we as Christians have to stand up and say that's not the case. And we also want to say that there's more important things than our rights and our individual freedom. As Christians, we care more about our duties, the things that we're required to do. God has commanded us to do certain things, and those are more important than what we consider our rights and our freedoms. We are often called as Christians to give up our rights, to give up our freedoms for things that God has called us to do, to submit to His laws, to His commands. And so in our country today, in 2020, most of us probably in America believe that our rights and our freedoms are the most important things. And we as Christians can be countercultural by saying there are duties and there are obligations as Christians that we need to take seriously before we take our freedoms and our rights so seriously. We need to fight for the unborn and their rights, their freedom. That's more important than our own individual rights and our own individual freedom. Looking out for other people, right? That's the, part of the Christian message. So, Roe v. Wade, it probably shapes our lives in ways that are probably, I think, more important than anything else that happens in the 1970s. This landmark decision, which has really scarred our legacy as in American history. I think even most conservative Christians would probably say that if we're being honest, that we have done a lot of bad things in our own country's history. Sometimes we like to just say, oh, we're the good guys. But we have often been responsible in our country for terrible things. Abortion is one of those things that we need to, as a country, repent of. We know that in the Holocaust, we lost 6 million Jewish people. We vilify, rightly so, Hitler for that. But we also need to look at our own selves and say we've done some bad things in our own country. And abortion is, to me, the top of the list. So that's something we can be praying about, repenting of as a country, and hopefully you guys and me and our generation can continue that fight, that struggle, and kind of continue that legacy that we talked about last week of nonviolent protest that Dr. King gave us the example of fighting our government in a way that doesn't require physical violence, but stands up to evil. So there you go. In the 1970s, lots of things happen. I think the most important is the landmark case, Roe v. Wade. Let me know what you think tomorrow in class. See ya, guys.